Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to another episode of the Hack My Age podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to me and to Rowan, our next guest. I'm still in Prague. If you've been following me on Instagram, you know I'm still hunting for more interviews with Czech women. I find the women in Eastern Europe are really hard to open up, but we're cracking some of them open. So look out for those fun 1 minute menopause interview reels on Instagram and Facebook. Now, before we jump into the introduction with Rowan, I want to remind you that the Biohacking Menopause membership group, this is a private women's only group, is got some pretty cool guests still left for this month of August. We've got Jody Harrison Bauer. She is the oldest Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, and she's coming in for a live Q&A. She's there to answer your questions about body composition, nutrition. She's amazing. She's in her 60s, and she's just smashing aging, and I love it. So she's going to be on for us there. We've also got Dr. Indra Barathan. She's our in-house functional medicine doctor to answer your questions about menopause and hormones, functional medicine. And also, we're so lucky to have Carol Peterson. She's the compounding pharmacist I've interviewed several times already, and she's really controversial. And I love her take on hormones and compounding and anything you need to know about menopause. She's also been working for probably about 3 decades or so, maybe more, I think, with women and helping them through menopause. So she's just gold. So jump into the group before September 1st to catch all of these wonderful women. Of course, every month we've got more and more wonderful women. And this month's giveaway in August is True Diagnostic. This is a kit, a biological age test kit. It is the most comprehensive one that's out there. It's jam-packed with information. The best part of it that I love is the pace of aging. It measures your telomeres, your methylation. We did a whole podcast all on what this kit does. So you can go back to that. I'll have that in the show notes. But the giveaway, we got one giveaway for one winner in the group. Everyone in the group is eligible to win, but we also have 4 kits that will be offered at only $150. This is normally, I think, at least $230 or $250 a kit. So it's really great value. Jump on in. Biohacking Menopause. The link is in the group. It only costs $24.99 a month. So mega savings. Awesome people we get to meet. And remember, if you can do it right now, you can just pause it if you like. Go rate and review and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And if you have, I love you. I appreciate you so much. These are little gestures by you. It takes 2 seconds, and it makes the biggest impact with the podcast because it helps us grow. It helps us get more noticed. It brings more information about menopause to the women who need to hear it. So let's move on to our guest, Rowan Sanderson. He's just brilliant. I think you're going to really, really love him. We talked to the podcast how we met, so I won't talk into that. But generally he had a really amazing, successful career in the financial world in London. This is like 15 years ago, and then he had what he calls a spectacular burnout. And he had a breakdown. His health took a dive, and then he had a rebirth or a renaissance. Thank goodness. And it was during this really dark time of his life that he found functional medicine. And that's when he realized that not only would this hold the key to unlocking his own health issues, but there was not a person on the planet who did not need it in their lives. So he set about 7 years retraining in functional diagnostic nutrition, and several other schools of nutrition, and then health coaching before studying functional medicine with the one and only Chris Kresser at CIFM. This is now called the Kresser Institute. And if you've been like me on this biohacking and wellness circuit for the last several decades, you will know Chris Kresser. He's just a brilliant guy. He's all about gut health and many other things. He also has a brilliant podcast. So I asked Rowan how he got into women's health, and which he'll explain to you guys in the episode. I won't go into it, but he's always been drawn to endocrinology and hormones and our power to influence our health positively with a combination of lifestyle, nourishment. He loves to talk about nourishment, not just nutrition or food, nourishing our body, and strategic supplementation. Now, he's a supplement junkie like me, but you will not believe what he told me off camera after we recorded. So we're going to have to do another episode about resveratrol, pterostilbene, and St. John's wort. And basically, if dosed inappropriately, which he says most of us do, they're pushing us into those undesirable estrogen pathways, which could do more damage than good. So this is going to be our next episode on like the things that can go wrong with supplementation or with biohacking and things. So look out for that one. Now back to Rowan. So he was really one of the first practitioners to embrace the Dutch test. That's the dry urine test of comprehensive hormones. And a lot of females who are taking menopause hormones, we like to use this test. And he's one of the first in Europe. About 10 years ago, he studied this, and he consistently used this, and he still loves it. And he learns so much from it, and he evolves through all the lab findings and insights that he gets through all of his clients. So I know this is a guy talking about menopause and hormones, but please hear him out. He really knows his stuff, and his dedication to helping women, in my opinion, is absolutely genuine. So before we get into the podcast, I have to read the fancy disclaimer that none of this is intended as medical advice. It's intended to empower you with more exciting knowledge to make better decisions so that you can live a better, more radiant life. Now, let's get started with the show. It's a real pleasure to have my new biohacking bestie, Rowan Sanderson, with us on the show today. Welcome.
Zora, welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I confess, I was super humbled to be invited to come on and speak with you today. And, I confess a small's nervous around it as well. You're a figure of inspiration. So bravo and kudos to you. And thank you very much for the invite.
Oh, it's been so fun getting to know you. I met you. I'm just going to give a background for everyone how we met because it's just recent. It's last June through my other biohacking bestie, Natalie Nidham, who everybody should know here. She's got a great podcast called Longevity. Go listen to it. She knows you from years ago through the Dave Asprey, the bulletproof training. But anyways, just she came with me to Spain. You were in Spain. She says, we got to meet Rowan. We met, but how did you meet, Nat? I mean, you guys go back a while, no?
It's nearly a decade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Natalie and I have had the luxury of knowing each other for a long time and seeing each other through this whole biohacking evolution. And actually, both of our return to health and, let's just call it holistic abundance through focusing on health. So it's been a real joy to share part of that journey with her.
She was so excited to connect us, and it was really fun. So we met on the beaches of Tarifa, and we totally connected. And I learned more about what you do and your space, and that blew me away. And I think the universe meant for us to collide and meet because we love to help women in menopause and women's health. So I know why I got here. How did you get involved with women's health and why?
Well, this is a really interesting story, and I'll keep it brief. I always say that actually I never set out to strategically become involved in perimenopause or menopause. It literally came and found me. I was in the middle of a most spectacular breakdown, burnout, health crisis of my own. And I'm somebody who really doesn't like a generic answer. I like to dive in and find out what's truly happening. Because, quite often people give you a big hands, small map approach, like you need to rest more, or it's this. What does that actually mean? And I think this is why one of the reasons you and I connect, because Laura, you're somebody who always goes, how does that work? Is that correct? Do you have any papers on that? So I know I always have to be on my game. And when I was investigating my own health, at the same time, lots of people in my entourage were going into perimenopause or menopause, and I've had the luxury throughout my life of always being supported and surrounded by some extraordinary female people, female figures, and the same things were happening. They were told that they could do HRT, but it could raise their cancer risk, hormonally driven cancer risk, and all of them, virtually to a letter, after 3 or 4 months of feeling awesome, suddenly started to pile on weight. And then what I did see is they didn't dare come off it because they felt better than before. So they move into this period of acceptance and self-blame. One is they say, oh, well, it must be me doing something wrong, but I can't come off it because I feel better than I did before. I can't possibly go back to how I felt before. I need to function. I need to have a life. And I think maybe not being as involved in that, except as a friend or a brother or a partner or a whichever, it allowed me to take a little bit of distance and go, somebody's smoking crack here. If you go to your doctor and he says you can try this as a health solution, but it could raise your cancer risk. Oh, and by the way, you're going to put on weight, which could raise a whole host of other symptom risk. If we transpose that for 1 second,
It doesn't sound horrible.
and
Why
you
would
go
you
to
do
the
it?
vet with your beloved dog, insert your dog's name here, and the vet says, hey, I've got a solution. Your dog's going to feel better, but your dog might get cancer and it's going to get really overweight. But
It's nuts.
you'd say, I'm paying for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You wouldn't do this to your dog. So why would you do it to yourself? So I guess to answer your question, I looked at this and I was like, hang on, all of the testing that I'm doing for my own health actually has the answers to what's going wrong with this process.
What testing was that?
Well, I mean, bear in mind, this is nearly 15 years ago. So a lot of these tests are antiquated. So there was a series of gut testing, cortisol testing, and one of the first versions of the Dutch test, which was about 11, 12 years ago, if I remember correctly.
And that's the dried urine test of comprehensive hormones. Anybody know what
Yes,
that is?
by those wizards at Precision Analytical who are doing an incredible job. So I looked at that and I would never claim to have the answer. I'm a humble bit part player in this huge jigsaw, but there is a perspective that I can bring, a torch that I can shine into that darkness and say, hang on, I think, and we now know because it's clinically proven over a decade, that if we address these points, those issues go away. But I'm jumping ahead.
So that's how you got into women's health, because you were surrounded by these lovely ladies who were all suffering. And then you had this perspective like, what is going on? And
Yeah.
just wanted to help them because you were helping yourself. You figured out what's working for you and you thinking, well, all these diagnostics, we can apply it to a female. And then how did you get your first toes dipped in that area of women's health and seeing that transformation?
If I remember correctly, it was simply some friends I was speaking to. And I think it was even somebody I knew from the gym who was a celebrity trainer and then suddenly started sending me a swathe of actors and actresses. And particularly among the females, all of this data added up. And then it just snowballed. It became bigger than me. I never advertised. It was purely by referral, word of mouth, by testimonial. And I haven't created anything. I wouldn't claim to have created anything. I've taken knowledge I've learned from much smarter, brighter people than myself, but just applied it in this space.
Yeah. So cool. And it's amazing that your background as well, when you've done this bulletproof training. So you've got the biohacker hat on that so few people have, even in functional medicine. You've got the functional medicine training. You did the Kresser Institute training. I mean, this is the Dutch training. These are all like a dream I guess person to have, or a doctor or healthcare practitioner, to help us guide through our health, our health issues. And I want to go to the weight gain part, because that is, I just posted this video, reel that I did with Dr. Felice Gersh, and she talked about weight gain and weight loss, and saying estrogen actually promotes weight loss. And the question I posted on there was, did you gain weight or lose weight on HRT? And of course you have both, but there were a lot of women who had, I'm gaining weight on HRT. What's she talking about? So I want to address some of this issue right now, because that's even how you got into this space, and how did you help these women? So first, let's talk about, then let's just jump right into the weight gain. Why are these women gaining weight while they're on HRT and they've been told, hey, estrogen should help you lose weight or manage the weight? You're not going to gain the weight, or you'll have better insulin control, et cetera, et cetera. So what's going on here?
This is gold. This is absolutely gold. And I'm so pleased that you are helping pull back the curtain on this Wizard of Oz or Wizard of Doom, because people go to HRT to feel better, and they have every right to feel better. And quite often they're thwarted in this mission by a whole host of unwanted symptoms that go with it. So, based on clinical observation over the last decade, 12 years of specializing in this, and we've been pioneering functional endocrinology, as I like to call it, taking a functional medicine and nutrition approach to endocrinology. The number one reason, believe it or not, is misdiagnosis. So,
This diagnosis of what?
your current estrogen levels.
Oh.
Now, I have a specific example of a doctor who's in our community, who's one of my clients, and she is super advanced in terms of endocrinology. She's very knowledgeable, but it's so easy to get this wrong. And people love to actually biohack this issue, but you simply cannot guess it, because there are so many unique patterns within female hormones that you need a specific flag in the ground of where you are. And this is why we use functional testing with the Dutch test. So to answer your question, so many of the symptoms of estrogen lack are the same as estrogen excess. So people assume that as they're going into perimenopause and menopause, that they've got a lack of estrogen. When in fact, what we're seeing increasingly, and this has increased over the last decade, we're seeing more females have estrogen dominance than estrogen lack. Yes, eventually they're going to move into estrogen lack. So when you look at some of the symptoms of estrogen lack and excess, such as libido, irregular periods, mood, anxiety, brain fog, all of those are the same. So if you read something on the internet and you say, oh, wow, I've got all of those symptoms, you could be self-diagnosing with estrogen lack. And actually you start to supplement with estrogen and you make the problem worse. So this is surprisingly common. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is the symptoms are the same. Not all of them. Osteoporosis, osteopenia, vaginal dryness, that's obviously lack of estrogen. But unless you're really drilling down, you could be misdiagnosing. And there's also a timing of the test. And are you testing all the metabolites of estrogen? Are you testing E1, E2, E3? Or when you're doing bloods, are you just looking at estradiol, the main one, E2? You have to add all of these up to get your true picture of estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one reason, why is it creating weight gain? Hands down, I'd say 1 in 2 people who come to me think they don't have enough estrogen, and in fact, they have too much. The reality is they don't have enough progesterone to oppose that estrogen.
Yeah, so you saw some of the comments on that post where, and it's, I've seen this as well, where you're feeling great. Actually, the hot flashes are gone, sleeping better at night, the anxiety is down, and so we have this impression, well, great, your estrogen is working or your HRT is working. However, they're like, the downside is now I have 10 pounds or 20 pounds, or I cannot get rid of this weight. And I've been doing this for 8 years or 8 months or whatever it is. Everybody has their own reasons. So so how do they know then if they're feeling better, then what is it? The estrogen, the progesterone, and yet gaining weight.
So there's a couple of parts to this. If we skip through the 5 top reasons, I guess estrogen is really, really sophisticated hormone. It does so much so much more than we initially thought. Yes, it improves mood in the right amount. There are a load of receptors in the brain for estrogen. It does so much more, but it's very much a Goldilocks hormone. Too much will promote weight gain. Too little will prevent you from losing weight. So there's this part to it, but there's also a really interesting enzymatic pathway between sets of hormones. Imagine this like a game of snakes and ladders, and this is a snake which takes you somewhere else. If you have any degree of underlying inflammation, there is a snake called CYP19, and what that does is it takes your estradiol, or rather it takes your testosterone and it converts it to estradiol. So you could be supplementing with estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and your HRT seems to be working. You feel great. And this is the typical story. First 3 months, wow, brain fog's gone. Wow, libido, motivation, going to the gym, doing loads of sets. At the same time, you have underlying inflammation. CYP19, the testosterone you take is then converted into more estrogen. So you might have started, let's say, for example, this doctor that I've been looking after recently, with already a little bit of excess estrogen. You've tested your bloods. It looks like actually your estrogen's down, but when you actually look at the urine, you can see that through adipose tissue and all the other pathways, you've actually got too much estrogen to your progesterone. You add a block of all of these in, you feel amazing. Your relationship's on track. Everybody's libido's in sync. You're sleeping through the night. Hot flashes have gone away. Suddenly, 10 pounds come out of nowhere. It's normally month 3 to 6. What's happened is that testosterone which you've been taking is now being countered or changed through this snake into more estrogen. So you've created massive estrogen dominance. And this is where it gets really unjust in my mind, is if you look at the way progesterone goes through a female's body, progesterone gets to a point where it can be used as progesterone or it can be used as cortisol. Lots of people use all this newfound energy to go to the gym and bully themselves back into shape because they feel bad because I've not been training hard enough, because I've been worn out, I've been depressed.
And they're
Actually,
finally getting good sleep and they're not waking up at night. And so now they have more energy. And yeah, it makes sense.
they,
They're going to the gym. Now it's time to burn off this fat.
yeah, exactly. It's like Christmas has arrived after 3 years of no Christmas. It's like, let's go for it. Let's unwrap all of these presents right now. Actually, accidentally and with the best of intentions, we're triggering a whole cortisol pathway. So the progesterone's getting turned into more cortisol. The testosterone's being turned into more estradiol. And suddenly we've got this huge surplus of estrogen and loads of cortisol, which is a weight gain grenade.
Mhm. What's interesting is that sometimes you have women when they do have excess estrogen. They feel it, they have tender breasts, maybe even the hot flashes come back and bloating. I mean, all these things can happen. So it's hard to say then, does a woman then, if she's getting this, excess estrogen, if they're not, sometimes they're not feeling this. Sometimes they feel it, sometimes they don't. So is it obvious if they do have the excess estrogen every time, most of the time? Are you saying that there's some outliers that are just like these women who are like, I feel great, but I don't feel the excess estrogen?
I think it's really difficult to differentiate whether it's excess estrogen or lack of estrogen, because so much of the symptomatology is the same.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two rules as far as I'm concerned around estrogen, estrogen is great. It's a longevity hormone, for goodness sake. We need it to keep our mitochondria turning. We need it for gut health. We need it for brain health. We need it to regulate cholesterol. So many of the clients that come into our community, we see they've got absolutely rampant heart issues, cholesterol issues, because their estrogen's out of whack, which anyway,
Mhm.
but the two rules around estrogen is it being opposed in balance with progesterone, and are you metabolizing it in a safe way? If you can manage those two factors, then all of this weight gain issue and simply addressing inflammation and the way you nourish yourself and train and sleep, all of it goes away. It's not rocket science. You simply need to be methodical. And it's quite interesting because a lot of people turn around and say, that all seems like a little bit complicated. And where I am right now, I'm in this kind of place where I just need an answer. And my response to that is, this is the answer. This will get you to, to place B, where you feel better, quicker than going this route, which is, and I've seen this time and time again with clients who say, actually, I've just seen a doctor and they say, I'm going to do it this way. They go through this 3-6 month cycle. They spend a year losing the weight. They come to me and say, actually, I am ready to try this. And then we get them there quicker. It's almost like training in a way that's going to get you injured.
Mhm.
It might be more training, but actually, if you look at it over the course of the year, what gets you the best result? And it might be doing a little bit less, more consistently, and come around working on mobility and some other things.
The way to test how we're metabolizing our estrogen, because you said this is a big factor, is like
It's
what's going
huge.
on with this, as the testosterone converting into estrogen, and how much do you actually really have? What are the metabolites doing? Is the only way to test that through the Dutch or the 24-hour urine test?
There are a couple of people who are emulating this now. And I'm not affiliated to Dutch or paid by Dutch, or I'm simply using that because that's the best way that I know of currently, to actually test for this. If there's something better that comes along, then I will use it, because for me, it's what best serves my clients and the community and their journey, rather than commercially or whichever. It's clients first. So right now, the Dutch is the best way of looking at this. If something else comes on, then we'll change it.
Mhm. So there are other tests that I understand, like Meridian Valley, or there's Dodge. These are just brands, and 24-hour urine tests. It's a different system, but they're all looking at metabolites.
Yeah.
And so that's what we want to see. And I guess if the doctor is trained in the 24-hour urine test, like Dr. David Rosensweet, he's been doing that for 3 decades. I get it. He's not into the Dutch because he's just studied this. It works. And he understands 30 years of his clientele, how they're responding. That makes sense. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. Some doctors prefer Meridian Valley for whatever reason. But I did an interesting podcast interview with Carol Peterson, who's a compounding pharmacist, and she was just like, you don't need any of this stuff. Come on, you can find out how you're metabolizing your hormones through certain blood tests or looking at homocysteine or whatever. Are there any other tests that you know of? I mean, I know the Dutch is it's easy for you because you got it, you understand it, and it's quick and all that. But I'm wondering, for those people who maybe just can't afford the Dutch test, and they're worried, and they do want to see what's happening to the metabolites or how they're converting. How else can they look at this?
You know, this is kind of, it's news to me, and I'll be really open as to why. I'm astonished at the pricing difference between Europe and the UK for Europe and the US for what is a US test. We charge our clients, I think it's $275 for the Dutch, which is the price we pay for it.
Mhm.
And I see them in the US for $750. So just unpacking a little bit what you're saying, I totally respect there's lots of ways of looking at this cat, of the metabolites cat. For me, in Europe, and we've got clients in Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, loads in the US and Canada. It's way cheaper to do a Dutch test and more efficient for a client's time and more revealing because we get the cortisol curve over 24 hours, which is key to this as well, than it is to do a series of blood tests. Trying to get blood drawn for 73 different metabolites is horrifically expensive and doesn't show the last pass of your hormone metabolites. So I'm whilst I respect everybody's comments on this, I'm a little bit confused and I genuinely don't understand how bloods could be cheaper, easier than actually doing a urine. I
Well,
agree
that's if you need all 73, but I think her argument was you don't need that many. And I'm just thinking about, I mean, and of truths in the US, it is more expensive, but then we also have to think of the cost of somebody interpreting it for you. So I'm really thinking and I'm thinking about the person who contacted me yesterday from the
okay.
Philippines, and she's got no money. I mean, this is somebody, she can't even hardly afford a doctor kind of sense. And I actually, this is maybe something I should talk to you apart on how to help these women who honestly have no access, no resources, and I still want to help them. And I give them all my time, and this is nothing out of this except happiness that I'm helping somebody. But when I get some of these reels that go viral and I get hundreds and hundreds of comments and hundreds of women coming to me looking for help, and I know they cannot afford your services. They can't afford mine. They can't even afford a $24.99 membership in my membership group. It's like beyond. So that's another whole other conversation that you and I will have to talk about. But
It
I'm kind
is.
of almost thinking about, well, that poor woman will never be able to afford what we're doing. And hardly, I guess it's better that she gets any kind of help rather than, can't get these fancy things. But I
Well,
don't know. I mean, that's
let me commit to this right now because this is a huge problem. And I will happily grant her a year's access to our community and gift her our course. So let me commit to that now. She can have access for a year to our community, and we will give her the course, which addresses all of these things that we're talking about. I've done a series of 12 workshops which work through this so that even without testing, you can get your hormones in the very best shape, even before you go on to HRT. So she can, with the utmost of pleasure, have those.
Well, that's just one person out of 100. I answered 100 messages the other day and trying
Yeah.
to help each one by one. So that's just one. I mean, we gotta come up with another plan, but that's a whole other
Yeah,
conversation. And
100%.
yeah.
But this
So
is true, and I think what you're doing, Zora, must be super respected because what you're doing is you're pulling back this whole curtain on a couple of myths around menopause and myths on how you treat menopause. And if anybody listening to this was to take one thing out of what we say today, I would love them to go away feeling empowered, knowing that they have way more influence over their level of hormones, their state of menopause, the symptoms that they experience, and their whole experience for the 10 years that peri and menopause may take, simply by addressing some of the fundamental building blocks of their hormone health. But before we even go down bioidentical HRT, testing for metabolites, or looking at the top of the pyramid, yes, they may need a whole comprehensive approach, but there are so many other things that we can address to help these people that cost them effectively nothing.
That's a point I want to bring up, because when I was reading, so the videos that honestly that go really viral, and this is the one, not the Dr. Gersh one. I'm talking about those 1-minute reels, and they usually go viral in the Philippines or in India. And I get all these comments, but the one with Felice Gersh, that one you could see they were a different type of woman. And I noticed in several of those comments that the women were saying, again, HRT is great, I'm sleeping awesome, but I am training for a marathon. I am exercising 7 days a
Holy
week.
moly.
I am. And so what thought of me, first thing I thought, it was remind me of the clients that I used to work with who were in perimenopause, and they were in their 40s, and they were, this is back in Hong Kong when I didn't know anything about hormones. I didn't talk about hormones at all, but it was clear to me that they had chronic cortisol, chronic cardio, chronic cortisol. Cortisol loves body fat, especially in the belly. And and many of the women I was working with, I don't know the ones in the comments, were also not eating. They were eating very, very little, training very hard. And that's a major stress for the body. And of course, the body wants to hold on to the fat. So I think we need to talk about some of the other techniques. Okay, there's HRT. Let's figure out the HRT. Let's get in balance. Could be progesterone, could be estrogen, but maybe they're just training too hard and they need to cool it on the cardio. Or not that they have to give this up. It's just too much. So what are some of your tips? I'm guessing that will maybe be one. Other tips that women can do to control the weight, not necessarily blaming the HRT or maybe getting it into balance, but how can they even support what are the other parts of the moving parts?
Brilliant. I 100% agree with all of these observations of yours. I've seen this so many times. It's incredible. So if we zoom out for a moment, and your comments really resonate with me about the other doctor you mentioned who's been using the Meridian Valium, he's been using it for 3 decades and everything. One of the reasons I love using the Dutch is because they've got like well over 2-3 million results, and you can really dive into the data. And one of the things that fed back to me is the 2 biggest influences on the female hormone pathways, as in levels, how you process them, how you metabolize them, whether or not you're converting your DHEA that's gone into testosterone back to estradiol. All of these things, 2 biggest things are inflammation and stress, followed by something which can be created by inflammation and stress, obesity. So first thing is, let's stop looking at all of these tools, these biohacking tools, as a giant panacea for everything. Beating yourself up or punishing yourself is creating more stress, not less stress. Bearing in mind that over 3 million results, two biggest factors, inflammation and stress. So inflammation, big result straight away is stop creating intestinal permeability. Intestinal permeability is the gateway to stress. So many people, they're eating things which are creating intestinal permeability. They're doing their greens, which are full of wheatgrass and all these different things, contributing to inflammation, to intestinal permeability. Grains do not want to be eaten. They trick your body into releasing zonulin that opens your gut lining. Before you know it, you've got a whole inflammatory cascade going on. Just stop that at source.
Wheatgrass is a grain?
Wheatgrass, I have found, well, wheatgrass is just wheat that hasn't grown properly.
Oh, it's wheat. Yes. Okay. Duh.
Yeah. And I found that it can be a huge trigger in lots of people.
Interesting.
Now, people will say, well, that's not true. It's not gluten. Okay, it's not. It might not be. I'm not talking about this. We're not falling into the gluten wormhole of debate. What we're talking here is look at this through the lens of your immune system. The lens of your immune system, it's there to try and protect you. It's working 24 hours. It's not had a holiday in years. You're already under stress. It's been hypervigilant unless you've already reached total exhaustion. And it's going to react to loads of things you didn't used to react to before. How many people do you know have said, oh, I just can't drink red wine anymore. It makes me really stuffy. Well, why? Because you're having a histamine response. Your immune system is super stimulated. So we just need to calm everything down. So going back to your point, what are the takeaway things that people do? It's literally, let's stop creating intestinal permeability and let's looking at the basket of stressors that you're currently exposing yourself to. And it might be focusing on sleep. It might be changing your normal draining routine, and I specifically say draining routine at the gym, where you go and you drain yourself and you beat yourself up because you're training for something. Why are you in the special forces? Or are you busy working mom, juggling loads of different things, and you've decided to train as if you're in special forces? I mean, not necessary right now. That's pushing you back, not pushing you forward. And really start looking at moving and resetting your circadian rhythm. Look at blue screens, look at your breath work, look at what you're eating to nourish you, look at spending time with people you love. All of these things are going to calm your autonomic nervous system down, lower your cortisol to an appropriate level, and actually start letting progesterone go through to progesterone and stop your testosterone converting into more estrogen. That in itself is a huge win.
Mm.
It's
Gut
a huge
health.
win.
Yeah, gut permeability. Let's explain what that is in case somebody doesn't know what that means.
You have, when you think about it, your gut is one of your primary interfaces with the outside world. It's the outside world inside you. It's a gateway. It's a tunnel which goes through you. You could effectively eat a piece of string and it come out the other end. You know, if we were to be crude about this, it's a tunnel which goes through you and the outside world interacts with you. You have in your gut a really thin layer called the epithelial layer, and those cells, which are one cell thick, they need to be tight. Now, what people confuse is they think of probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, the metabolites produced by those, as all beneficial. If you're taking probiotics and your gut is open, then those bacteria, good, bad, indifferent, are going into your bloodstream. They're covered in something called a lipopolysaccharide shell, LPS. That goes around creating rampant inflammation, heart problems, brain fog, mood disorders. Now, this is a key part of your health jigsaw, especially your hormone health jigsaw. Why? Because estrogen is a master regulator of intestinal permeability. So already females are subjected to a load of stress, biological insults. To actually create more of those, and one of the other contributors to intestinal permeability, apart from alcohol, is excess training.
Yep.
And then another contributor, excess fasting. Excess fasting will go and it will liberate amino acids from your gut lining to actually break them apart and create glucose. Now, if you're stressing yourself with cold water immersion and excess cardio and CrossFit and HRT and fasting and super low carb, you have basically created a basket of stressors that your body cannot recover from. So rather than pushing it, creating a stress from which you grow stronger and healthier, a hormetic stressor, what you've done is you've just pushed yourself over. You're going to be weaker and less strong and less healthy from all of these stressors. So if people are feeling super tired after they've been training, or they've certain food and they need to have a nap suddenly at 11 o'clock in the morning, that is literally a wake-up call that what you're doing is a bigger stressor than your body can currently cope with.
You just talked about all the hacks, the biohacks that we always talk about in the biohacking world is people are hearing everything about stress and keto. I mean, so keto and ice bathing and how good it is to fast and how good it is to, exercise. And it's just, yes, these are all, when we talk in the biohacking world about these things, they're supposed to be hormetic stressors where, a little bit is good for you. But in the case of a woman getting excess body fat and she thinks it's her hormones, and maybe it is, and maybe they're not converting right, but adding all of these other stressors when you're not really in a good condition is actually, going to tip you over the edge. So it's interesting to hear, all these things that are quote unquote good for us. And in fact, they can be really bad for us too if we're not done in the appropriate time, in the appropriate way. And so your message is let's get the stress down and fix the gut. And the gut is one of those things that I think a lot of people struggle with in menopause and perimenopause, and they don't
Yeah.
associate it to their hormones or the transition or getting older. And so what are your let's talk about, we got a little bit of time left. Let's talk about your three biohacks, let's say, more or less, for women in peri and postmenopause and who are struggling with weight.
Right. This is absolutely gold. Now, would you like me to exclude testing from this or HRT or anything and just actually look at the actual, shall we say, building blocks of hormonal health that we can go for?
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk. We talked about the testing and getting our hormones sorted. That goes without saying. Like that's kind of
Okay.
a foundational too. I never say, I always say you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle, but at the same time, I've seen plenty of women get the diet and lifestyle right, and their hormones are need to be sorted out. So they kind of go hand in hand.
They do. And just looking at the data over the last 12 years and feedback is quite often by taking our approach, by looking after your health first and understanding your hormones, we have delayed people's perimenopause and menopause process by 5, 6, 7 years. So people
Mhm.
have started perimenopause and then dropped back out of it and started cycling regularly, and all the symptoms have gone away. Why? We've addressed stress and inflammation. So
So you
I
can reverse menopause? That's a catchy title.
well, perimenopause, yes, you can definitely suppress it. And I have people now, menopause, as all of your listeners know, by definition, um, it's 12 months after your last period, 12 months after your last menses. I have seen people start cycling again using this approach. I'm not going to claim that, but what I will claim, and please be skeptical and please stress test me on this, is that by using this approach, the course that we've put together, which is based on the best things we've learned, the biggest wins over a decade, yeah, we've dramatically, consistently lowered perimenopausal symptoms or put it in stop temporarily. That is a fact.
Mhm. Stop
So
perimenopause. Stop perimenopause. So, okay, let's talk about
let's
then how do
pause
we
on perimenopause.
yeah, let's put the pause in perimenopause. These are interesting. So what are then what are you doing with these women? What are the three? Let's say I know you do a lot of things with it. What are the top three?
Well, we've got 12 main building blocks, which we take people through and we have a workshop for. But what we specifically do in the first instance, which is I know is a big favorite of yours, is focus on sleep. Now, sleep should be everybody's dirty secret. We should be talking about sleep in the same way that we took in our 40s, 50s, 60s, in the same way that we talked about cocktails and dating in our teens and 20s. Make sleep your very best friend. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Well, one, it will spike your natural levels of growth hormone if you're doing it correctly. 2, it helps reset your circadian rhythm. And 3, I'm not going to put this out as medical advice. We need to also consider using melatonin. Why? Well, melatonin is a master antioxidant. It's a huge anti-inflammatory. And in fact, it's made not simply in our pineal gland and in the gut, but in our mitochondria. It's made in our mitochondria to keep those powerhouses cool. It's the coolant in the engines of our mitochondria. So actually having plenty of melatonin means that these mitochondria, our energy producers, the currency of life, ATP, actually work better. The fission and fusion, the whole thing works better. So sleep is a go-to, resets your autonomic balance. Sleep, fixing digestion, and correcting intestinal permeability, because that stops the majority of inflammation. The rest of the inflammation that we've seen over the last decade tends to come from beauty products and exposure to, as Natalie always likes to mention, those trees that she finds in the Uber cars, you know, synthetic fragrances and sun creams with all the parabens and the rest. Okay.
Yep.
So addressing the sources of inflammation. And actually, I know this is a huge favorite of yours, and thank you for your recommendation, because it changed with whom I was training myself to do female-specific breath work. Addressing hypoxia. Addressing hypoxia and really being able to calm your immune system, calm your autonomic nervous system and flip into parasympathetic. Those 3 things together pick you so many marks.
Mm.
It's astonishing. Never, ever, ever underestimate your power to change not simply your health and your hormone balance, but your experience of life.
Sleep is like such a magic bullet. I love it. I love it. And it's a lot of people can't sleep because of the night sweats or the hot flashes, or maybe, they're just, there's a lot of reasons why women are not sleeping, but we got to help them sleep. And I think the breath work is such a great tool, because instantly it helps with sleep. And it's sleep and stress go hand in hand. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
sleeping because you're stressed out. So how do I sleep if I'm all stressed out? So I always think those two go together, because it's so easy to say, oh, well, just go to bed early and go to sleep. But too many women I've spoken with are just struggling. So this is where the hormones can really help a lot. And then we get into the conundrum where finally they're sleeping, and then they go exercise like crazy and not eat enough, and there's a whole other can of worms. So we got to put all of this stuff together. You mentioned melatonin, which I thought was really cool. Did you ever check out herbatonin? I think I told you
Yes.
about this
Yeah.
plant melatonin.
Yeah, absolutely. I listened to that podcast. I was blown away. I was like,
Yeah.
this is gold. And
Isn't
as
it
soon as I
good?
find a decent source for Europe, I mean,
Yeah.
for our clients in the US, who anybody who's in the community, we can pretty much, as long as our distributor has it, offer them 10% off any supplements and
Oh, cool.
bioidenticals we can find. Um, Herbatonin is something I need to put in our toolbox. I listened to that and I was ping. This is absolute golden piece of the jigsaw that needs to get fitted in straight away.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So you mentioned the breath work, you mentioned the melatonin, getting to sleep, setting circadian rhythm, and these are things. And it's interesting how you say all of this can help us with the gut. Right. Some people think, oh, it's going to be the food, or it's going to be this. And what you're talking about is lowering inflammation, lowering the stress, and lowering getting to sleep, allowing the body to recuperate, because that's what happens when we sleep. And I'm glad you mentioned growth hormone, because if we're trying to burn fat, well, we need to build muscle. And if we're trying to build muscle, then that growth hormone's released. I can't remember if it's like between 12 and 2, or there's some time
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in the evening, right? Where it's optimized and it's released. Don't jeopardize that golden sleep, because that's where all the magic happens. So, if you are training hard at the gym, then make sure you sleep. I mean, you gotta recover. So I'm gonna have to wrap this up because we still have so much to talk about. And I think we're gonna have to do a part two. But you mentioned a little bit about your program, and tell us about your community that you got, and how people can get in on learning more from you.
Oh, yeah, with pleasure. And by the way, you had a question for me as well about progesterone increasing glucose.
Oh,
Have we seen that? Do you want to
yes,
cover
yes.
that?
Oh, yes, let's do that, because that was one of our members in the community. And
Yeah,
she just told me about, she's got a rise in blood sugar whenever she puts her CGM monitor on. That's that continuous glucose monitor that measures the blood sugar. And when
yeah.
every time she takes progesterone, glucose goes up, and then, it takes off doesn't put the progesterone cream, and then it doesn't have this spike. So what's going on there?
Well, I will quickly cover this up because I knew that one of your members wanted to know about it. It's through a process. Yes, there's a direct link. There's a direct link. And we've seen this time and time again in our community with clients. Everything. It's through a process called HP RMC. And if I get this right, it's hepatic progesterone receptor membrane component, HPRMC. And when
Yeah.
you think about it evolutionary, it makes sense. Progesterone levels rise. Progesterone is the hormone of growth. For that, you're going to need glucose. You're going to need to stimulate mTOR. I know some biochemists out there would be a bit finicky about what I've just condensed into a quick sentence, but ultimately, it's a very easy way to remember it. Progesterone is the hormone of growth for embryonic growth, etc. You're going to need to liberate some blood glucose. There is a direct link between progesterone supplementation and raising glucose. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's a normal thing. However, a couple of caveats. Typically, we see that over exaggerated in people who are hyperglycemic, as in they have too much blood sugar, they've got poor insulin function, they've got insulin resistance, or when they are actually the other end of the Goldilocks line and they have been excessively fasting and they're hyperglycemic. So if somebody's seeing that consistently enough for it to show up and for that to affect them, would investigate, have they actually got too much carbohydrate, sugar, triglycerides in their diet? What's going on there? What's going
This
on
is an
there?
excessive faster. I mean, I would call it excessive faster. 18 hours a day, more or less. Stops eating
Wow.
dinner at 5.
Right. So that gavel down Sherlock Holmes can go back to, writing up case notes with, Dr. Watson. Fasting way too much, in my opinion. Fasting is really cool, and a very, very good friend of mine and inspirational mentor has been Joel Green. He's really shown how fasting, you can get the benefits of it without the downsides. And if you're consistently fasting, you are compromising your glucose transport. You are going to decimate your gut bacteria. You will create intestinal permeability, and then you will get a whole host of food sensibilities. Fasting is a super tool, but so is a power drill. If I go around and power drill a couple of holes in my house, great, I can put some shells on. If I power drill all day, I've got a house which looks like a Swiss cheese, wind and rain comes in. So you use it judiciously. It's all about levels.
Cool. Oh, thank you for that answer. She's going to be very pleased with that. I and so let's talk about your community then, because I've been pretty fascinated with, we and I met several times. I've sent you my information about my hips, and you've got me sorted out on a new cool guy who's going to get my mobility back. And we talked about my hormones, and I'm really impressed with your knowledge. And
Thank you.
honestly, it's beyond what other doctors I've seen. And I've seen some pretty high level doctors, and you've given me a lot of your time, which is like unbelievable how much time I you spend with me. I'm guessing this is with your clients, it's quite similar. Of course, if you're in a group setting, it's different. But if you have a one-on-one, wow, you blew my mind. Let's talk about the community you've got here of women as well, because I'm just tapping into that and dipping my toes. I was blown away also by your first video module, all on sleep. That was so pleasing to me. And I told you earlier that I was watching and you were getting to the end. I'm like, I'm looking for stuff as I'm getting to know you. I'm looking for stuff to pick on. Like he didn't, and I said, "You didn't talk about alcohol and sleep." I'm like, "Sorry, you didn't." And then at the end, of course, you talked about alcohol and sleep. And I'm like, "Okay, Rowan is got my heart and he's got the brownie points." So I would really love to share more about what you've got because I'm really just dipping my toes in right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I deliberately left the alcohol to the end because quite often not everybody is ready or wants to hear that. And as soon as people hear what they don't want to hear, they stop listening. So I needed to sneak all the other golden information in before I delivered that, a little bit like a Columbo moment at the end. Just one more thing.
Yes.
Um, so I, we've seen over the last decade that about 80 to 85% of HRT does not work in the medium to long term for lots of reasons we've covered today. One of the number one reasons that has to be considered is that people do not feel supported or have the support or go to be able to ask questions because hormones are not one-dimensional or two-dimensional. They change during the month, during the year, with your supplements, in periods of stress, sleep, all of it. What we've created is a community where you can get access to a functional medicine practitioner, a nutritionist, a doctor, a fascial specialist, some breath work, all of these different things for less than the price of a cup of coffee a day. So if you've got questions that you need to ask about your specific protocol or how to address inflammation or whichever, Monday to Friday, there'll be one of us from the team there answering your questions to help you. The next part of this is quite often people feel really isolated. They feel so isolated and alone in what they're going through. They don't feel like they're able to talk about their partner, or they don't have much time, or because of anxiety of all the other different things, they're not sure on how to articulate it. You've got a safe space of like-minded females going through the same thing that can inspire you to take action. And what I love about this is I'm a guy here. What I like is the social proof, the testimonials, somebody who posted in the group saying, actually, we did the nourishment module, some feedback from 2 weeks ago. Look at all of my markers. Dramatically dropped weight, dramatically improved sleep, dramatically lowered stress by not focusing on any of those, just by looking at nourishing themselves and eating enough. We should be focusing on nourishment, not diet. So the community, it's a safe space. You've got access 5 days a week to a functional medicine practitioner, a doctor who specializes in hormones, a nutritionist, practice manager, people to support you. You have access to classes. We have a live questions and answers once a week. So if you really want to speak to somebody rather than just having something written, we've got space. We have an open forum for people to actually ask questions and get specific guidance on things. That is game changing for people, having their hand held through this process. Why are people doing it alone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Less than a cup of coffee a day. You don't need to wait 2 weeks for an appointment. On top of that, you get access to a course that I've written, which really brings together the 12 biggest wins in your hormone health pyramid, including sleep and digestion. They're all about an hour. There's questions and answers at the end of it. They're constantly being improved. How to address energy, your mitochondria, how to do sleep, how to nourish yourself, which foods really serve you, which ones you need to be a little bit wary about, how to train, release fascia, improve the whole gamut. And as we learn more, those are going to be improved. Now, that's basically it. If people then want to actually also have one-to-one consults. We have a beautiful team working with us, and they get discount being members of the community to all of us, whether it's doing the fascia as you are, or whether it's testing. And for those people in the US, we can actually set up and drop ship all of their supplements at 10% off the list price. And that's just part of us wanting to help as many people as possible, because we feel that this problem is something that can be addressed or massively improved if we all work together.
The community is called Renewal, right?
That's right.
Renewal Community. And that's at hormonebalanceclinic.io, not .com,
Correct.
right? IO. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes. So is that what, $150 a month, or how much is that?
Oh, no.
So price of
The
a
course,
coffee. I don't know what, depends what
oh,
country we're in, counting
yeah,
coffees.
absolutely. No, we've priced it a lot less than that. In fact, we started, and typically the course is £600 if you just wanted to buy the course. And the community, I believe, was £900 a year, and that would include the course. But what we're doing exclusively for your listeners, and this is for a limited time, a limited amount of people, because there's only so big we can allow our community to grow, is we're offering this for £50. And I think that's about $62 a month. And we're going to include the course with that. So they can have a £600, £750 course. They can have £900 worth of community, daily access questions and answers, weekly live questions and answers. Breathwork classes are coming out next week. Yoga classes are coming out next week. And fascia classes are coming out next week. So they can have all of that for, and forgive me if I've got the exchange rate a little bit wrong, it's for £50 a month. Now, our goal is to help as many people as possible and to create a thriving community where people help each other and we get to guide them. And that's really what we're about. That's what makes our heart happy.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great deal. I'm definitely going to be participating more and more in this community. So I wanted to get to know it a little bit before we even had this interview, and I'm excited to learn more. So I'll be in there. And if anyone wants to find you, again, the hormonebalanceclinic.io, Instagram as well, the same name. And I'll have links to all of this in the show notes and how to reach Rowan. And before I let you go, Rowan, do you have any last words for women going through the menopause transition?
Yes, you're not alone and there is hope. We have clinically proven methodology to walk you through this. So whatever you're feeling right now, there is a solution to it. Please never underestimate your own power to influence your health. I've seen this work for 100% of people who apply it.
Ah,
So there is
yes.
hope there. Can we stop the menopause? No. Can we make it a better place? Yes. And we've not even talked about biopeptide regulators or nootropics or any of the
Methylene
others,
blue. Oh, all the cool biohacks.
or any of the other super fun stuff we can do once we've got a stable base for you to build on. So it's up to you. Could be a decade of your life. It's a chance for renaissance. It's inevitable. So please let us help you make it the best possible experience possible.
Thank you so much, Rowan. I'm so glad we connected, and
Me
we'll
too.
definitely have a part two. I'll see you next
Oh,
time.
awesome. Thank you for your time. Really, it's been a pleasure.